secret. Anytime you're given a card, you're only you are allowed to look what's on the card for pretty much every instance, except for Destiny. Destiny deck, you basically have to flat out flip out and say, okay, here's our problem. Here's the crisis we need to resolve. Silent accusation. Here's the typical move is, okay, well, let's see, I'm Tom Zarek. I'll just go to here, draw some quorum cards. So you draw some quorum cards. You're like, okay, well, I got some quorum cards here. I can assign a vice president or food rationing. Food rationing's pretty good. You roll a die, I believe. You roll a die and you gain a food. If you don't, then no effect and you discard the card forever from the game. Or you can, you assign a vice president, I believe. You give this card to another player, and then if somebody activates the administration, which allows you to pick another person as president. If somebody activates this, then or if the president loses his president title, then it has to go to the vice president here. Otherwise, you could pick who you want to be vice president. I believe I didn't explain that location, but now I did, so that's good. So, what else? If you are a Cylon, let's say you are a Cylon and you've done all you can do, nobody really found you out, or you think they're on to you, then on your card here, Cylon cards have a bad thing on them. Like this one, can send a character to the brig. This only activates if you successfully reveal yourself to be a Cylon. And when you do, then you can send a character to the brig, and it can be any character. If the character happens to be an admiral, he is stripped of the admiral title. And it goes to the person next highest in line. If the person is the president, they actually keep the presidency. And putting presidents in a brig, typically you don't want to do that because they have, look at that, I got lucky. They have these cards. Or they might have this card, Presidential Pardon. Move any other character from the brig to any other location on Galactica. And these are very valuable cards, probably one of the most valuable cards to get. They can basically get themselves out of jail if they want to. And if you reveal, then you send somebody to the brig and you get one of these nasty ones. These are Super Crisis cards. And these are cards that are always bad. They don't have any jump symbols, so they're super bad. And these are fleet activation symbols. Actually, I should explain these. That little star there with the missiles flying out of it, those are base stars, which are these star-looking things here. Later editions of the expansions, I mean, have actual 3D Cylon ships that look really cool. I just have vanilla, so all I have is the cardboard ones. So those would fire on Galactica. That's pretty bad. That Cylon ship there, every time you see that in the corner of a card, as you can see in Crisis cards, most of them have a symbol like this on them. That means that happens. And then there may or may not be a jump symbol here. If there's no symbol there, then the jump track doesn't move. But if this symbol's here, that means this guy, if this were the actual game board, this guy would fire on this guy. And if it rolls a certain number, then it's damaged. And it goes to the damage pool. And it needs to be repaired. If this symbol here, if this symbol activates, this right here in the middle, this kind of car looking like symbol, that means this thing here moves further towards Galactica. If it gets here, it goes in and it moves. The Centurion marker is placed there. If you see this symbol again, if you see that symbol again, then it moves one more point, and it keeps moving until you blow it up in the armory. There's also a presidential card called use of brutal force, I believe. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Authorization of brutal force. That guarantees that it will be blown up, and you roll a die, and basically if you roll high, then you don't lose a population. If you do roll low, you lose a population. So it's a risky card, but it's more than welcome to be played. Nobody will think of you're a Cylon if you do that. As you see, population is the highest resource to get to that you start off with, or one of the highest. But it's also the hardest to regenerate. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's any cards that regenerate population. There are cards that boost morale. There's inspirational speech. And those boost morale. There's also special leadership cards that you can play. That after you blow up a base star, you can roll the die. If you, or actually, after you blow up a base star, I think you automatically get the morale. You get a morale boost. Food is up and down. It's probably the most fluid resource. Food goes up and down. You can get food. Actually, I'm sorry. Morale is more of a fluid resource. It goes up and down. Food is kind of a little more scarce. Food is the most scarce. Fuel, I mean. But anyway, yeah. When you successfully reveal, or if you pop yourself in the head, if you're in the brig, popping yourself in the head is code for revealing yourself in the brig. But you don't get the text on the bottom, so I wouldn't have been able to send somebody to the brig. But you do get one of these Super Crisis cards to play. And these are bad. Super Crisis cards are bad. So, on to the characters. I'll show each one of them and give a brief overview on them. Maybe I'll start off with the political leaders since they're already, well, this was mixed up. Did I say political leaders? Because I meant military. I'm going to start off with political since there's 3 of them and they're already here. These are the 3 political leaders in the vanilla version of the game. I'll go in order of succession, I guess. May as well. Laura Roslin here is a character. They're all characters from the show. This is the card she draws. Religious Visions. When you draw 2 crisis cards, when you draw crisis cards, draw 2 and choose one to resolve. Place the other on the bottom of the deck. That's pretty powerful. That's her perpetual ability. She's allowed to use it whenever that situation comes up. And when she draws crisis cards, it may necessarily not be on her turn. So there's situations where that might come up where she might have to draw crisis cards. She can just do it. She can use her thing. And then let's see. I'm sorry for the music, folks. It's distracting. Skilled Politician. Once per game, draw 4 quorum cards. Choose one to resolve and place random on the bottom of the deck. You do not need to be president to use this ability. That's pretty good. I mean, she might be able to use one of the quorum cards there, even if she's not president. Terminal illness. Yes, her character has cancer. In order to activate a location, you must first discard 2 skill cards. Normally, depending on the location, normally you don't have to discard skill cards. Actually, I don't think you do have to use a card on some locations. You don't. Some locations you do. Pegasus you do on the engineering. But she has to discard 2, and she's almost always out of cards. Which really sucks. But her ability for crisis is her perpetual kind of makes up for it. Here you have Gaius. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll go on Gaius Baltar. Gaius Baltar. In politics, leadership, and engineering. As you can see, he's the only character that's allowed to draw 4, but, I mean, everyone else draws 5, except his perpetual ability. After you draw a crisis card, draw 1 skill card of your choice. It may come from outside your skill set. So that's pretty helpful. Even though he's not allowed to have 5 cards, but, you know, if he's not in the brig, hey, that's pretty nice. So that means if a piloting or if red or something like that comes up, piloting or tactics come up, he's allowed to draw them if it's on his turn. Cylon Detector. Once per game, you may look at all loyalty cards belonging to another character or another player. On the show, he builds a Cylon Detector, and he successfully detects a Cylon. However, well, I won't spoil it. But yeah, all loyalty cards, because I know I told you only get 1 loyalty card. Well, however, if you jump to a distance of 4, so let's say, alright, so you've jumped this, the 3 jump I showed you earlier, you jump up the track and then you jump, okay, 1 more. You jump the distance of 4, then the sleeper agent phase activates. the sleeper agent phase, that means you're dealt another loyalty card. And if that card says you are a Cylon, then guess what? You thought you were human, but you're not. You're a Cylon. That means you're completely changed. You have to fight against the Galactica, and depending on how well you're doing, that may be easy or hard to do. So generally, you don't want to be doing too well because you might be a Cylon. It's all a gamble. So people you once thought were friends may turn out to actually be Cylons. Baltar shares something with Boomer, and that his bad thing is that he starts the game off with 2 loyalty cards instead of 1. So he has a higher likelihood of being a Cylon. Boomer's bad trait is that she draws 2 loyalty cards at the sleeper agent phase. So it's more likely that she's a Cylon in the second half of the game as opposed to Baltar, who's more likely in the first half of the game. This is Tom Zarek. He's the last political leader. Like I said, there's 2 more with Exodus. Actually, Pegasus adds somebody else. Who in Exodus? Who's the other political leader? Well, that makes me think. There's somebody I'm missing. Who's the other political leader? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll remember. Friends in low places. When a player activates administration at the brig location, you may choose to reduce or increase the difficulty by 2. That means it's easier for him to choose another player. He makes it easier or harder to choose another president by activating this location or getting out of the brig. He can reduce it by 2 and that'll turn into a 5 skill check, or you can make it harder, make it a 9. Unconventional tactics once per game. You lose 1 population to gain 1 of any other resource type. That's pretty devastating. If he's a Cylon, he can actually lower fuel. Or he can raise it if he's pro. Convicted criminal. You may not activate locations occupied by other characters except the brig. Because he is a convicted criminal, nobody trusts him, and he doesn't use any locations that are occupied by other people. Which means you can kind of block them from using quorum cards if you send your ass over there to the president's office. However, that kind of renders you ineffective if you're not president. But it's a nice pro-Cylon tactic if you want to fight against Baltar if he's a human. And let me get the rest of these cards. These are the political leaders. I will go in the line of succession again. Bill Adama. He's probably the main character on the show. Inspirational leader. When you draw a crisis card, all strength 1 skill cards count positives or a skill check. That means even if a skill check, and it's only on the crisis card. On the skill check, when you draw one, it's like, oh no, okay, well this one's politics, tactics, and leadership. That means if you have a strength 1 engineering card, like the repair cards I pulled earlier, those count positive for the skill check. But only on his turn, because only on your turn may you draw crisis cards. Well, not necessarily. Like I said with Laura Roslin, you might actually have to draw a crisis card when it's not your turn. That's pretty rare. Command authority. Once per game, after resolving a skill check, instead of discarding to use skill cards, draw them in your hand. That's pretty worthwhile. Even though your max hand is 10, if you have more than 10 of these cards, you have to discard the leftovers. So that's pretty good. He could steal some pretty good decent cards and be able to use them on his next turn. Or if his turn's coming up. Some of these abilities may only be used as an action. Some are just ones that they can use at almost any time if the conditions are met. I'll give you a good example. In Tom Zarek's case, in order to activate unconventional tactics, he has to do it on his action turn. That's why it says action there. Like I said, you get a movement and an action. Some abilities are perpetual or don't need an action. This is another action one. A good example would probably be Boomer. Boomer here is allowed to. She's able to use it. She's able to use both her moves, her perpetual and her once per game, even though it's not even her turn. So she can use it without having to waste an action. Adama is emotionally attached. You may not activate the Admiral's quarters location, meaning he cannot initiate the move to move somebody to the brig. This is the Admiral's quarters. That's where you go to throw somebody in the brig. And he can't use it, even though that's his office. Saltai. Silent Hatred. When a player activates the Admiral's quarters locations, you may choose to reduce the difficulty by 3. That means it's easier for him to throw people in the jail. That means that skill check of a 7 could potentially be a 4 if he wants it to. And it could be anybody who activates it, not just him. Declare martial law once per game. Give the President's title to the Admiral. He may not necessarily be Admiral, even though he's second in line, or third if you count Pegasus. But the option's there. Alcoholic. At the start of any player's turn, if you have exactly one skill card in your hand, you must discard it. That's because he's an alcoholic in the show. And that's pretty rare that you only have one skill. Well, actually, no, it's pretty common if you have one skill card in your hand. But if you have only one, then you blow it. And I remembered who the other political leaders are. It's, well, I just remembered. I'm not even going to say what they are. His wife is in Pegasus. You can play as her. Helen Tai. And the last military leader of the vanilla version is Hilo. He is the only military leader that can launch himself into a Viper, as he is still an active pilot. He's actually a Raptor pilot. But and for the sake and purposes of the board game, he can pilot a Viper. ECO officer. During your turn, you may reroll a die that was just rolled. You must use the new result, and it's once per turn. So that means, so if you're in the armory location and you roll a 6, you can go, darn, well, I want to reroll. You can reroll and you hit a 7 and boom, the Cylon is dead. Or if you're in FTL and you screw up and you lose a population, you can roll again and get that population back if you roll high enough. Moral compass. Once per game, after a player makes a choice on a crisis card, you may change it. Some of these crisis cards have a player chooses, or admiral chooses, or president chooses. And they're towards the top, I believe. Here it goes. Admiral chooses. Let's say, okay, -1 round, the Admiral receives the president's tile, or -1 population, Admiral discards 2 skill cards. You can see this. And it's pretty interesting because if somebody chooses the or, you can say, no, I want to choose the one on the top. And then that's a pretty spicy move. And his weakness is that one. That's Saltai. Dirt. And his weakness is that he's stranded. Basically, he has to wait until his second turn in order to be able to do anything. You may not be moved or take actions. At the start of your second turn, place your character on the hangar deck location. It's because on the show he is stranded on Caprica for pretty much all of the first season. And here is the one support character. I'll get into him real quick. The other 2 expansions add 2 more support people, I believe. Callie and I forgot who the other guy was. I'm forgetting who everyone was. Oh, Duala. Maintenance engineer. During your turn, after you use a repair skill card, you may take another action once per turn. So that means he can move to the hangar deck ideally and repair 4 Vipers. These are the repair cards, and if the thing focuses right, you can see that that's Galen's face. You may repair 2 undamaged Vipers, or repair your current location. But he can repair 4 Vipers, or he can repair the location and repair 2 more Vipers, or he can repair and do something else on the location. He can repair and then use a politics card on here, like investigative committee. His weakness is, blind devotion. Once per game, after cards have been added to a skill check, but before revealing them, you may choose a skill type. All cards of the chosen type are considered strength 0. So that means you wait for everyone to throw in skill cards. This ability requires the utmost timing. I've seen people blow it, where before they add skill cards in, they say, oh, well, I want all treachery to be 0, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to throw in my treachery cards. This has to be said after the cards are added to a skill check. Basically, when you see the player shuffling the skill cards, that's when you call blind devotion. Never do it in the beginning. Never do it before. I've seen people screw this up so many times. You really need to wait and play your cool. A lot of these once per games are surprise actions that you can use to basically confound people. And you can look at a pilot. You can have a red skill check and look at a pilot, and you throw in a pilot, throwing in a bunch of cards. And he's like, well, all those cards are red, and I don't want him to win. I'm a Cylon, so I'm gonna say all piloting cards are strength 0 after you throw them in the skill check. So there's strength 0. You made the player waste his cards, and you walk away a happy man because you just won a crisis. And this character's bad ability is reckless. Your hand limit is 8 instead of 10. Normally it's 10 instead of 8. So if you have 9 cards, he has to discard 1. Or if you have 10, you have to discard 2, and etc. Support characters, generally they run the gamut. Callie, I'll explain Callie in a little bit. Her perpetual ability is that on her turn, just pretend this is Callie. Pretend it's his wife. Her perpetual ability is jury-rigging. She can knock out a card from a skill check. On her skill check, she can knock out a card. On her crisis. When it's during her turn or something like that, you know? So let's say you get a bunch of cards here, and then one of them's like what is this on the top here? Okay, that's not a good example. Neither is that. This is not my day. Okay, well that's where all the repair cards are, obviously. Various cards have various strengths on them. All these are 1. So let's say you do a skill check and you see, oh my goodness, there's a 2 on here and it's preventing me from winning the skill check. You can knock it out. And you can win the skill check. Or you can sabotage if you're silent. You can knock out the highest friendly card and cause them to lose or win. Her once per game is discharge of a firearm. Once per game if she's allowed to execute somebody in the same location she's in. And that ability makes her popular to play. However, her downside is that she can't contribute just 1 card to a skill check. She has to contribute 2, which isn't all that bad. But her spread of cards is basically 1 politics, 1 leadership, 1 tactics, I believe, and 2 engineering. It's actually a very weak spread of cards, meaning that in the beginning, in the first 10, typically she can't help at all, or she can only help with 1 crisis, and then she's stuck. Callie's another person like Laura Rosling, really doesn't have all that many cards. And like I said, Callie is initially a person you really want to play as. She's kind of fun, but you gotta keep in mind it's a very boring game if you're playing as Callie. You're basically a one-trick pony. You're around to shoot somebody. People pick Callie because her once per game. Her once per game is really outrageous. Being able to kill anybody you want is very dangerous.